This year has been a runaway train packed with excellent RPG and strategy titles, and we've found some surprisingly good games coming out of some unexpected places.
Today we're taking a look at one such game. Last Train Home is an inventive hybrid tactics game from Ashbourne Games, a small studio based in the Czech Republic. While Ashbourne boasts a number of credits playing support for much bigger projects like Arma and Mafia and some kind of helicopter shooter thing, Last Train Home appears to be their first solo adventure, and it's a surprisingly ambitious one.
The Steam page for Last Train Home builds itself as a survival real-time strategy game, which normally wouldn't really trip any triggers for us, but when THQ reached out with a couple of review keys, we decided to give it a shot, and we were surprised at how much this little locomotive has under the hood. Management layers, RPG elements, squad-based tactical battles, and life-or-death decision-making are all vital parts that work together to get this engine moving. Its post-World War I setting is a deep vein of history that gaming has left largely unexplored, but can Ashbourne manage to keep this iron horse in one piece, or will all these moving parts make this crazy train fly off the rails? Let's find out. My name is Boss Sauce.
And I'm Roland Coons. And together, we are the two-headed hero.
In the interest of full disclosure, THQ provided review keys for this game, and while we haven't quite reached its conclusion, we've definitely played enough Last Train Home to get a good feel for its fun factor, as well as its flaws. Here's my playtime as of writing the script. And as always, if you like our vibe and want to support our never-ending journey into the depths of our backlog, we'll mention some ways you can do that near the end of the video. Anyways, full steam ahead!
Toot toot! Last Train Home takes place in a historical setting based on real events. It's 1919. The Great War has just ended. The Great War! The Great War! And Europe is in fragments. Sorry. A group of Czechoslovak soldiers finds itself stranded on the wrong side of Siberia, and their only chance to make it home is to cross hostile Russian territory. 9,000 kilometers of it.
That's 5,592 freedom units, and yes, that is a long way to go. This will be more than just a leisurely trans-Siberian train tour. The Bolsheviks are vying for control of the region, and brand new provisional governments struggle for dominance in a time of economic collapse and political upheaval. Hostile forces won't be the only hazard on your journey. Finding enough food and fuel to keep moving forward and stave off the frigid winters will be vital to survival.
The game opens up to a short motion graphic cutscene highlighting the precarious situation facing the Czechoslovak army. After this, the player is plopped into the muddy boots of an army captain. You're treated to a few railroad fetish shots of your shiny new coal-fired beast as the gravelly voice of Major Gazdik
Vezmite si čatu a vyrazte obchodovat s miestnym mlynárom.
Issues your first orders. Barter for food and supplies from a nearby grain mill.
Your little squad learns how to move, scout territory, and pick up supplies until they run face first into a grim reminder of the Red Army's tactics. Take what they want and burn the rest. From high up on the hill, your troops eyeball the offending looters, but Gazdik orders a stand down, fearing retribution from the Red Army would put the train at risk and dash any hopes of returning home. Dejected, the soldiers temporarily satiate their bloodlust by taking out some unfortunate scarecrows and cracking some really weird, baseless Baba Yaga jokes before returning to their steely home.
Upon return, we peruse our loot and see the first example of an RPG-style dialogue. These conversations show that the soldiers themselves are more than just walking rifles. They've all got their own beliefs, weaknesses, and personality traits that open up more role-playing options and influence how these text adventure events can turn out.
You get a short peek at running your train down the rails until you're suddenly stopped in Sukanichi, and this is where your little warband will first encounter Morozov, an almost cartoonishly evil general in the Red Army. Morozov pumps the brakes on your on-rails excursion, and you're forced to squad up and find a way through his forces to continue on the trail. This is where the Last Train Home railroads you into the first real combat encounter.
Last Train Home's tactical sections feature mouse-driven controls that are fairly familiar to anyone that's played a real-time strategy game. Maps are fairly sizable and detailed and can be rotated or panned in any direction with the middle mouse and WASD keys. Contextual cover and flanking are significant keys to success, and soldiers get access to a few passive or active abilities based on their current class and what loadout they are assigned before a mission.
With a little practice, you'll quickly learn to put these individual skills to use. Sukanichi serves as a more extended tutorial to show off the range of abilities available to your squad, and even lets you toy with artillery support from the train. Figuring out when to rush a position with a bayonet charge or hang back and funnel enemy forces into a machine gun nest quickly becomes second nature.
So far, this all seems like fairly standard historical wargame dressing, right? Well, there's one vitally important detail that sets this game apart and launches it squarely into the realm of strategy RPGs. The game can be paused at any time with the tap of the spacebar. Yeah, that's right, Last Train Home is centered around a pause combat system. Normally, this is something you see in older party-based sword and sorcery RPGs, rather than grim and gray soldier stories such as this.
Surprisingly enough, this works pretty well. The ability to take a breath and issue out a mass of commands changes up the flow of combat entirely, putting a focus on thoughtful planning over the quick reactions and frantic micromanagement that real-time strategy games are famous for. There's even a ton of autopause features that can be tailored to your tastes, as formerly seen in fantasy RPGs like Dragon Age Origins or even farther back to Baldur's Gate 1 and 2.
Personally, I turned on all of them, and I found that a lot more suited to my turn-based strategy preferences. Pause combat is often a contentious feature. Some strategy buffs would rather ignore it entirely, running the game as if it was a particularly frantic round of StarCraft. Others consider it a half measure, preferring full turn-based strategy instead. Both of us lean more towards the turn-based strategy side, but with the right auto-pause options, it can still work okay. And some of the best RPGs ever created use a pause combat system. Maybe let us know what you prefer down in the comments.
After storming your way through Sukunichi, the menacing monolith of Moscow stands in your path. Major Gazdik smells trouble, and it's not coming from his pants. And he's right. Morozov derails your ride home, quite literally, by plowing another train full of explosives straight into yours. Morozov makes his escape in an armored truck, your mobile home is destroyed, and your commanding officer is kaput, making Moscow a fight for survival.
The stakes are higher here, and stealth becomes a most important part of your strategy. With proper timing and observation, your outgunned unit can make it through the treacherous streets in one piece, taking out or avoiding the patrols. Enemy AI isn't exactly brilliant, relying more on numbers than competence. But even though the stealth systems are rudimentary, takedowns are still pretty fun to plan and perform, although the game's inclusion of save scum options dulls the edge of any real sense of danger here.
Wait. What kind of options?
Save scum!
Crossing the city puts your troops in touch with Captain Langer. Is it Langer or Langer?
I don't know. Wanger.
Captain Wanger, a solemn-faced, bespectacled man that serves as your chief advisor and your second-in-command. The 30-minute mission climaxes in a massive battle where your band and your brand new buddies have to hold off waves of reinforcements and capture a replacement train in Moscow Station to make a hasty escape from the Red Army.
What's the app that's Uber but trains?
Chuber?
Chuber feels more natural. The Legion is decimated, Major Gasdick is lost, and morale is crushed. But all is not lost. You have a bunch of new soldiers and a new hope for reaching home. Locomotive Grandpa!
Aw.
Captain Langer smells trouble down the tracks, and this is not just Gasdick. This time, he sniffs out a few nearby locations where your survivors can gather fuel, ammunition, and supplies for the trip. This is where you learn more about the management side of Last Train Home.
At this point, your little brigade has seen some shit. But on the bright side, you'll have more than enough experience to train up some of your troops. Experience is tracked on a notably detailed stat screen. Character stats can be upgraded and enhance the effects of active and passive skills depending on your conscript's chosen class. Hitting stat thresholds also unlocks new classes that enable combat specializations like Rifleman or Grenadier, or even non-combat roles like Engineer or Cook that can be used on the train.
These roles go far in making your infantry more versatile and effective, though, whether they're deployed in the field or working on the train, and field abilities can be mixed into a soldier's 4-skill loadout to make hybrid class combinations. Peek a little further down the page and you'll see that each recruit has their own beliefs, strengths, weaknesses, and proclivities that come into play throughout the entire game. Each recruit even gets a short biography that provides a little insight into their past. This goes a long way towards starting to make your little guys feel like little guys.
That and the esoteric voice lines that they sometimes just seem to randomly spout off makes me feel like you have a train full of insane people. Insane in the train. The morale, comfort, and energy levels of your forces all contribute to their fighting effectiveness and their will to survive. In order to follow Captain Langer's advice and scout out supplies, you'll need to deploy some squads and search out the surrounding territory. ChooChoo Charles ain't gonna feed himself, and without important resources like food and fuel, your troops might desert while you're stopped dead in your tracks.
Each of these little excursions plays out like a short RPG dialogue encounter, sometimes with a moral choice to make, and your soldiers' individual personality quirks can influence how these turn out, opening up new options and extra rewards, or in some cases causing unfortunate injuries and loss of morale. Yeah, many map locations contain merchants or opportunities to harvest food and materials. Some even turn into full-blown side quests that require the careful attention of a rounded-out combat squad. It falls to you as the newly field-promoted commander to decide if the cost in supplies and blood will be worthwhile. And later on, these little dialogues and side quests can contain important strategic or moral choices that lead into branching paths, increasing the game's replay value.
These sequences might feel a little Spartan. They often contain just some text and a static image or two, lack any voice work, and don't have as much agency as recent gamebook-style RPGs like Citizen Sleeper or the excellent Road Warden. At times, it's hard to make an informed choice when some of these random events pop up due to how opaque these choices are and the seeming randomness of the results. Like the itchy butt situation.
So early on, there's an event that gives your crew scabies, and you pull down your pants to reveal a butt full of itchy little marks.
Good times.
And you're given a few options on how to deal with it. You can either wash the train and everything, you can burn all of the clothes that you can find, or you can ignore it and just have an itchy butt. Here's the little thing about that kind of event. You don't get to see what your choice is going to give you. So it turns the events into output randomness instead of giving them an element of input randomness and choice.
This is not consistent. Some of the choices you'll be making have a definite apparent result, but the itchy butt situation is a great example of one where you're not sure what to do about your itchy butt. A little more consistency would be appreciated here.
Well, we actually reloaded and tried all the options for the itchy butt escapade, and they're all bad outcomes.
If you scrub your itchy butt, it's the best outcome. But if you let your itchy butt fester, well boy, let me tell you, your soldiers are in for an itchy butt surprise.
The positive news is none of these situations are going to break your run on their own.
But overall, I still enjoyed how these encounters add to the grim atmosphere and the sense of history that Last Train Home tries to embrace.
If you manage to gather enough resources, you may get the opportunity to upgrade parts of your train to make it more efficient, sturdy, or even more comfortable. Slowly but surely, you'll rebuild your train from a clacky little engine that could into a steam-powered luxury war machine. Later on, you'll even have the opportunity to craft and research items to aid you on your journey by adding specialty cars for Locomotive Grandpa to pull around.
So you might be feeling pretty optimistic by now. Your veterans have already faced hunger, depression, gunfire, packs of angry wolves, and they've come out the other end relatively unscathed, minus the itchy butts. But all of this changes once your trusty little engine hits the city of Penza.
Penza is a point of no return, and serves as a sort of a final test before the game truly begins. The mission is easily an hour long, starting with a covert action to overtake the town's rail yard, moving to close quarters assaults in the city streets, climaxing in a church siege where you'll need to infiltrate a fortified position defended by multiple machine gun nests. You'll need to take full advantage of every trick and tactic you've learned so far to get through without significant injuries or casualties.
Hopefully you've managed to survive Penza with minimal loss, and maybe even freed a few prisoners of war to bolster your ranks. But now you've really kicked the high. The Red Army issues orders to relentlessly pursue, disarm, and execute any White Army or Czechoslovak soldiers on sight.
This is the final piece of the gameplay puzzle that makes Last Train Home feel like a desperate chase. Lingering in one place for too long is now just as dangerous as charging ahead recklessly, and there's always a chance that a spy plane spots you and puts a bunch of holes into one of your precious little train cars. Even so,
and several of your precious little soldiers.
Even so, the default commander difficulty never seems to feel overly punishing, and strategy diehards might even find the game to be a bit on the easier side.
We'd still be remiss if we didn't mention mention another strong and player-friendly feature that the game has: customizable difficulty. If the default settings appear to be too tough, you can always change things around to better suit your tastes, including tweaking the damage levels or even simplifying the management tasks. You can even put the game into full-on tourist mode if you just want to take a nice Trans-Siberian train ride. The attention to detail in the difficulty and accessibility settings does cross the tracks right over to the rest of the presentation, and the settings menu contains a pretty hefty load of preferences, graphical and otherwise.
There are a few accessibility options as well. I found it quite possible to control the whole game with just the mouse, and also crank up the size of that mouse cursor so it's the size of an apple on my screen. Real-time strategy games as a genre are not super accessible to some folks, and being able to pause when literally anything happens helps that a bit too.
The most impressive feature I found was the language settings. They have great localization plus a choice of several voiced languages: English, German, French, and immersive, which is a mix of Czech, Slovak, and Russian dialects that goes really far to enhance the historical setting.
Cítim dym. To nie je dobré.
Rychle!
I'd recommend leaving this setting on immersive, because
Cheer up, we'll be among friends. And if any of you get lost on the way, better get lost around the nearby factory to pick up anything of value.
in the same vein, sound effects are fine, with the barks of battle and thunders of poofy explosions hitting all the right notes. The music is what you'd expect, some standard orchestral soldiery fare. It's nothing super playlist worthy unless you like your workout songs filled with Russian misery, but there's some pretty effective themes and earworms nonetheless. Considering the subject matter, it fits.
Visuals are a bit of a mixed bag. For a budget title, this game looks pretty dang decent. Although you can't zoom in far enough to the little soldier models to see what they look like up close and personal on the field of combat, the environments and lighting look nice and detailed, and seeing the trusty train engine pass through the Siberian countryside on its journey is really enjoyable. It's a shame that you'll be spending much more time wrangling menus than watching the scenery go by. But even these menus and dialogues have some charm, with their telegram typography and war journal stylings punctuated by hand-drawn portraits.
Now, you had some issue with the portraits.
So I enjoy the overall presentation of the game. I think that they do a good job of combining a lot of the tropes of war documentaries. These war journals feature a mixed media approach with motion graphics and historically reenacted live footage, featuring narration from the perspective of Captain Langer. Yeah, these were awesome to see, really driving home that historical flavor down to the brass buttons on the officers' coats. And then you have the hand-painted scenes, and those are kind of all over the place as far as quality goes. The presentation works, it makes it feel like a documentary. Combining that with the RTS trappings on the battlefield, it holds up.
Combat missions have plenty of smoky explosions, red-hot bullets, and jets of blood flying through the air, and check out this really cool scripted biplane crash. That's good stuff. Where the game really shines, though, is in all the small things. Fish dart through the water beneath a rickety wooden bridge as your soldiers creep across in the moonlight. A peasant woman chops away at weeds in her turnip patch with a simple tool. Oh, my back. Oh. Flames lick the ruins of a recently raided windmill. After you've dragged your brigade bloody and bruised through yet another chapter, you're rewarded with one of the game's cutscenes. Wargames tend to have a pretty narrow range of writing styles and quest objectives. This is implicit in their nature, and due to this, a large part of the attraction for this genre is in the historical setting. While a ton of games cover the conflicts of World Wars I and II, very few explore the years between. Last Train Home leans into a very interesting and rarely discussed microcosm of Eastern European history. 1919 was a volatile and complex record for the Russian Empire, and the region staggered in the wake of multiple revolutions and disastrous losses from the Great War.
Since there's plenty of folks out there that spend entire careers studying this historical period, and we talk about video games, we don't really feel qualified to discuss this with any measure of depth. But I can appreciate the game spotlighting this time frame. A couple decent videos are linked in the description to provide a brief overview of these events.
So how does Last Train Home set itself apart? Well, the quests here lean more into the survival aspects, focusing on the needs of your train and its crew. Sure, combat missions missions tend to have the tried and true defend, destroy, escort, assassinate type of objectives, but your overall purpose is framed pretty well. This isn't a fight for dominance, it's a flight for survival, except on a train and not flying.
There's a micro-genre of games that spotlight management and morality, where eking out a survival for your faction with very limited resources at your disposal is the focus. Whereas a game like This War of Mine makes you confront your morality head-on, forcing you into an impossible choice that feels bad no matter what, Last Train Home softens this impact a bit through its framing. Management+Morality games often place you on equal footing with your rivals, but Last Train Home instead places you on the back foot right from the start. Because your goal is survival and your rivals is control of this country, the sometimes cutthroat choices that you're forced to make usually feel more justifiable. This is good, to be clear. It makes the experience decidedly less miserable, even though the setting is an often brutal one. The quality of the writing itself is also pretty decent, provided you can get past the occasional lost in translation moments or minor typos. The writers even took the effort to add extra dialogue based on the individual traits of your soldiers, and this detail extends to adding their character names directly into the stories. It's a nice touch, even if it doesn't always work perfectly.
Last Train Home might be full of some pleasant surprises, but this train ride still has a few bumps. First off, you can only have one journey at a time, so starting your new journey means wiping all your prior progress off the tracks. For the most part, the autosave was competent. You can still save scum at any time, so this didn't affect the game much, but it would have been nice to start a second journey in order to see how some of the branching paths play out, or play at a different difficulty level.
The work assignment interface feels a little bit clunky, requiring too much dinking around to add and remove workers. A way to auto-assign laborers to repairs and upgrades and create ready-made worker teams or engineering staff would be really welcome here. In fact, the UI could use a bit of reworking, being overly complex and sometimes more cumbersome than it needs to be.
Vehicle handling is also weird. Trucks don't really act like trucks, they're picky about terrain, and you can't squish guys under your wheels. They just kinda get politely nudged out of the way. Another sorely missing feature is the ability to move troops in formation. Your team just kinda moves around in a shapeless blob until they get to the destination. Since all the soldiers have weapons with different ranges and different movement speeds themselves, it would be really nice to be able to arrange the squads to move efficiently.
There are some issues with the AI as well. While the enemies will move around to flank and take cover, none of your troops seem to have much of a sense of self-preservation. They won't take cover or hit the dirt at incoming fire. This makes it feel more like you're controlling drones instead of actual people.
Your squad mates also don't seem to have range indicators for their basic attacks, but you can see the enemy's sight ranges. Consistency would be appreciated here, as clicking on an enemy to attack can sometimes make your dudes hop out of cover and charge directly into a bad time. A bunch of bugs were shaken out since the game first dropped its demo, but a few of the movement and animation issues still pop up every once in a while, like a hobo jumping out of a storage car. One particularly silly one allowed me to bring an unarmed, unanimated engineer into a combat mission, but this issue disappeared upon loading the game and appears to have been fixed in subsequent patches. Overall, these are nitpicks. None of this stuff is a game breaker or a deal breaker. If you've stuck with us this far into our little grim railway tour through Siberia, we just want to take a second here to say thanks for sticking around. And if you want to show us your appreciation, maybe check out our Patreon page, become a channel member, or shoot us a tip over on Ko-Fi. The lowest tier is just 2 measly coins, and monthly contributors can get earlier access to videos, special Discord roles, and their names immortalized in the credits, like these fine folks right here. Last Train Home is also available on GOG, so if you like what you've been seeing so far, buying this game through our affiliate link in the comments can also do us a solid. And of course, if you don't have the rubles to spare, it really helps out if you like, subscribe, and comment on this video, and share it with your buddies. You know, all the good algorithm stuff. We really appreciate it, and it makes a massive difference for our little channel here. Alright, let's pull this baby into the station and bring it on home.
Chugga 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 chugga. Choo choo. Last Train Home is an interesting design. It takes place during a largely forgotten moment in history and contains an unexpected mix of gameplay. This definitely earns it points on the originality scale. It's an addition to the management and morality microgenre of games, which may not appeal to all strategy or RPG fans out there, but if you do enjoy the flavor of making moral decisions along with mechanical ones, this is a worthy new option. We've included a few links to some other games that might grease your engine if you enjoy the concept behind Last Train Home. Check them out in the comments.
What's really puzzling is how much this game's marketing buries the lead by billing it as a real-time strategy title. This seems like a huge misstep, likely to draw the wrong crowd that's expecting a micro-heavy game in the vein of Sudden Strike or Total War, where units are far more disposable and reaction times are far more critical. And based on its taglines alone, players like us who actually enjoy the more deliberate pacing that pause combat provides would likely pass over Last Train Home without a second glance. After all the time spent in the trenches and passenger cars of Last Train Home, I've got to say I was impressed. The price is right for this budget level game, and strategy fans that want something unique need to check this out.
And if you're still not convinced, well, there's a really beefy demo that contains the first 2 chapters of the game, which is about 4 hours of content. Last Train Home is something we can gladly recommend, and we only hope that it doesn't get totally overshadowed by the larger, fancier games sitting out there in the rail yard.
Thanks again for watching, friends, and we'll see you on the next Two-Headed Hero.